Hi everyone, welcome to our live series, Let's Talk Service Dogs. Today we are going to be talking about the human end of the leash. So some things that you can do, or it is important that you understand as the human end of the dog-human leash to ensure success on this owner training journey. We're going to go beyond training skills and things like that. Now, if you are new to this series, please do remember that this is of course meant to be more of like a casual chat about service dog topics. So it's less structured than our YouTube videos and certainly less comprehensive than our online courses. But it's still a great way to kind of get in here and talk to you guys about some service dog training topics and things like that. Now, let me just double check my list super quick. Okay. So having said that, while this is less structured than our YouTube videos, I do have notes so that I don't forget the key things that I want to talk about when we go through this. Now, if you have questions about the things that we're chatting about at any time and you're here live, go ahead and put those into the comments. If you're watching the replay, the best place for that is your questions then is going to be in the Facebook group, Train Your Service Dog with Confidence. Depending on whether where you're watching the replay, sometimes it's hard for me to find questions on a replay. So the best place is going to be in the Facebook group. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about today is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Sorry, I'm probably going to mispronounce that a couple of times. And I want to talk about this because most of the things we're going to talk about as we move through this live stream is going to circle back to this this Dunning-Kruger effect. So if you look at this graph, and let's see, I'm trying to figure out where I go. If you look at this graph, we have confidence on the one axis, and we have competency on the lower axis. And what happens whenever somebody starts a new educational venture, we tend to see this happen. So very quickly, as we begin learning something new, our confidence goes up. And we start to think we know quite a bit, even though our competency level, how good we are, our expertise, is still very low, as we see on that lower axis there. Then all of a sudden, as you start to learn more and more, you start to realize how little you actually know, and the curve goes down, right? It comes down into that valley as you hit that sort of average competency level. And then slowly, as you become an expert, you learn, your confidence comes back up. So what happens with this basically is when you're new, and this goes across the board, I have observed this in so many areas of life. When we're new at something, we are very sure we know a lot about it. We are very sure that we are very good at it. And then as we actually learn more and more and become better and better, our confidence goes down because we start to realize how much we don't know yet. And only after experience and time and education does both our confidence level and our expertise on that subject matter start to go back up. Now, we see this in two areas of sort of the owner training community. And I'm just going to probably just leave this up in the corner here and we'll make it bigger if we need to. So we see this in sort of two areas of the dog training community, both when people are giving advice and when they are receiving or refusing to receive advice. So one example of this, for just as a really quick example, is we will see sometimes in Facebook groups recommendations for things like spray bottles or foghorns to be used as a punishment to get our dogs to stop jumping on counters or stop barking or whatever it is. Okay, now this is, not a piece of dog training advice I would personally use, but it's not the end of the world, as most people would think. But if you're new to service dog training, one of the things that you may not understand, or not you, the person, but just the general you, right, everybody, is that as that dog starts to do public access work, they're going to come across loud noises and they're going to come across spray bottles. And so it's easy as a beginner in the service dog training world to think that that piece of advice is still a good piece of advice. But as you gain experience and knowledge in service dog training, you realize how easily this can come back to bite you and your dog by creating these associations where now your dog is nervous about something they're going to come across in public really, really regularly. So we see this giving pieces of advice like that, just as a quick example. And also taking advice. People will almost, I'm trying to figure out how to say this nicely. My coaches and I have been working with owner trainers for a really long time. Okay. years and years. We've worked with lots and lots of owner trainers. And people at the beginning of their service dog training journey are usually the hardest to get to take advice because of this Dunning-Kruger effect, where they're so sure that they know enough. Okay? Now, the most perhaps dangerous line I ever hear within the owner training community is when people go, well, it worked for me. And they will use this when somebody with more experience, somebody more time and experience and education under their belt tries to kindly explain why one piece of advice may be better or worse or whatever than another piece of advice. And somebody will come in and say, well, it worked for me. Well, the spray bottles worked for me. And I have two things that I want to say about that. And we're going to circle back to how to piece out these pieces of advice so that you know more. So that I'm going to help you guys figure this out is what I'm trying to say. So there are two issues when I hear this, well, it worked for me as a defense. First of all, if you've only trained one service dog or maybe two, or you've only trained pet dogs, just because it works for that one person doesn't mean that it works for most people. So my coaches and I, who now have helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of owner trainers through this process, probably more than that, know that there are certain pieces of advice with a high probability of backfiring on their person, on that trainer. That there is a high probability that it won't work in the long run or it will come back with negative side effects. But if you've only ever trained one or two dogs, you don't have the sample size to know that. So this, well, it worked for me, just because it works for one dog, does not mean that it is good advice. Does not mean it will work for most dogs. And does not mean that it will generally lead to a good outcome for service dogs. So this, well, it worked for me, it gets very dangerous within the owner training community. This, well, it worked for me. The other thing, and I see this a lot in public access, so people, if you've been following us for a while, then you know that we are proponents of a slow, methodical approach to public access training. That puppies should not just be taken everywhere with their owners, that we don't want to overwhelm a young dog with public access. This is one of the biggest mistakes we see owner trainers make, and it comes back to bite them numerous times, and we have to fix things that wouldn't have had to be fixed if public access had been taken slower. So I often see this, well, it worked for me in regards to some type of public access training. The problem is that very often when I watch videos of those dogs work, they're not working as well as the handler thinks. So we see a lot of people, not everybody, but we see a lot of people say, well, it worked for me. And then somebody with more knowledge and experience and time under their belt doing this watches the dog work and goes, it's not working as well as you think. Because we can see something that owner trainer can't see yet because they don't have the knowledge and experience. So the way that you help this Dunning-Kruger effect work for you and help you along your journey, instead of getting trapped in it, either yourself or taking well-meaning but poor advice from somebody who is stuck in this Dunning-Kruger effect, is by being a perpetual student. So whenever somebody asks me, how do I find a good dog trainer? How do I know if I'm working with a good dog trainer? And I have a lot of tips for that. But the biggest one is if they think they know enough that they don't have to keep learning, that they aren't consistently learning more about dogs and dog training, you need to run away from that trainer. Any trainer who thinks they know enough, that they know everything, that what they're doing has been working for so long that they don't need to learn more, you need to run from that person. Most areas of life and most career choices, like dog training, for example, which can be a hobby, it can be a career choice, it can be an owner training journey. This is an area where, in order to do it well, you have to be a perpetual student. You have to continue learning. And when you don't, you get stuck on that peak in the Dunning-Kruger effect. You learn enough, you have this big confidence surge where you think you know enough, and you stop there. and then you never actually become really fluent in the skills you're trying to build because you've decided you've learned enough. So if you take the perpetual student approach to service dog training, it will help you not get stuck in this Dunning-Kruger effect. It will help you weed out advice. It will help you move forward. So you want to be consistently learning about dog training. And I'm going to give you some tips about what I think the most important things for you to learn are here in a minute. Let me check my notes. So there are a few things that I want to talk about as far as this mindset goes of being a perpetual student. And you guys, this Dunning-Kruger effect, this being a perpetual student, and the next two things I'm going to talk about really are make or break for your success as a service dog trainer or as an owner trainer. I mean, it really is that big a deal. So I want you to keep learning, okay? I also want you to, as a perpetual student, find a person or a group of people that you trust to give you feedback. Now, if you have a dog trainer in your area that you work with, that you trust, that is a good dog trainer who can help you along this journey, that is absolutely going to be the most ideal case, that you have found somebody with service dog training experience, with positive reinforcement training experience, and can help you along this journey. That's the ideal, in my opinion. However, not everybody has access to that for a variety of reasons. There are online courses like the ones we have, so our foundations course and our online academy, for example. There are Facebook groups like our Facebook group and other Facebook groups. There are owner trainers that get together in person. You really want to have at least one or a trusted group of people that you can get advice from, that you can show your mistakes to and know that they're going to be kind and give you feedback. And I want you to take that feedback and lower your defensiveness. So one of the things we see a lot in our courses is that a coach will give a piece of advice because the coach, remember, is on the expert end of this Dunning-Kruger effect. And the student is somewhere between none and average on competency, generally speaking, because that's where you are when you start something new. There's nothing wrong with being a beginner, okay? So what we will often see is a coach will give a piece of advice and the student will become defensive. And they will say, well, that won't work for me because of this and that and whatever. Instead of lowering their defensiveness and listening to what the coach actually said versus what was heard, so that that piece of advice can be helpful. Let me give you an example of this. A couple years ago, I was taking an online horse training course using positive reinforcement with horses. And one of my horses used to be quite tricky with positive reinforcement because he was so excited about the food and he's very large. So you have safety issues and he's very excited about the food. So he's not thinking and we're trying to keep him calm. Okay, I've been using a clicker for a very long time. My clicker training skills are very good. Okay. But in order for them to remain good, and in order for me to continue to get better, and in order for me to be able to generalize those skills to other species, for example, I need to let other people watch me train so they can provide feedback. So I posted a video of a very simple training exercise where we're trying to help teach the horses to remain calm for their positive reinforcement. My mechanics are good. I'm clicking on time. My treat hand isn't moving until after the click. I think my horse is doing pretty well, actually. Like, I watched the video and I think, yeah, there's room for improvement here, but I'm actually really pleased with how this lesson went. So I post my homework assignment. And the trainer is very kind. She's an excellent teacher. She's an excellent trainer. And she says, here's what went really well. I love that you did this. I think if you XYZ in your training session, you'll get to the next level. And my instant reaction was, well, we already do those things, and I already tried that, and this, and immediately my defenses come up and go, well, she doesn't know my horse. She doesn't know me. She's watching a 30-second clip of me training my horse. Immediately my defenses go up. So I take a second, let those defenses come back down, and realize she didn't call me a bad trainer. She didn't say, you didn't do this and that. She never said any of the things I heard. She was just offering me advice to get to the next level. So I lower my defenses, I go back to the barn, I implement those changes, and you know what? We got to the next level really fast and really quickly. And it would have taken me weeks to be able to see those very small changes that needed to be made. Because when it comes to horse training, I am very much on that average competency level on this Dunning-Kruger effect, maybe like beginner average. I am an advanced rider, but I am not an advanced horse trainer, and those are two very different skills. So when she gave me this piece of advice, my first instinct was to become defensive because she doesn't know my horse. She doesn't know me. This is the first 30-second clip she's ever seen of the two of us. And it is very easy to become defensive. But when we become defensive, we don't hear the advice that we asked for. And when we can hear the advice and go implement it, very often we're going to see the improvements that we want. And if I hadn't seen the improvements, I'd have been able to post another video of me attempting to implement those improvements. And she could have said, here's how to, here's what else you need to do, or here's how you need to change what I said, or whatever. So finding a place where you can post videos of not just the stuff that goes well, but the stuff that isn't going so well is really how you can push this forward. Whether that be you're training with somebody in person or you're posting videos so that other people can help you train. Now, of course, you have to have a trusted community that you can do this in because people online can be very mean, and we are trying to avoid that. We do want kind, constructive feedback here, right? So it's really important that we are, again, so keep learning, show your mistakes, take feedback, lower your defensiveness, and accept that some people really do know more than you when it comes to this journey. Not everybody. Not everybody. We want to use discernment in the advice that we are receiving and implementing, but there are people who know more than us. There are people who know far more than me about this thing, and I listen to them when I have a chance to. So this mindset of being a perpetual student, I'm just looking for some more, looking at my notes again. Again, this requires you to separate out what you're hearing from what is actually being said, because very often those are two very different things. I just this morning saw a post about parenting human children, and the post was excellent, and it was talking about not using fear with raising our kids and blah, blah, blah. It was a very good short post. And of course, the comments are going, well, there have to be consequences for bad behavior. Nowhere in the post did she say there shouldn't be consequences, okay? She was talking about a very specific thing. So what happens to our human brains because of things like confirmation bias and all these different things that our human brains do? We tend to hear something different than what was actually said because we take what was said, and we run it through our own filters. So when we are working with a coach, or we are working with another dog trainer, or we are working with other owner trainers, or we are working in a Facebook group, it is important to be able to separate what that person actually said from what you thought you heard, because those are very often two separate things. Let me take a sip of water here. I woke up this morning with a little bit of a cold, but I didn't want to reschedule again. So keep asking questions as well. So when somebody gives you a piece of advice, you don't have to take it blindly. And this is also something we encourage in our communities and in our programs. If a coach gives you a piece of advice, in our courses, for example, if a coach gives a student a piece of advice and they don't understand, they don't agree, they aren't sure why, they should absolutely ask, why do you recommend that? Or I don't understand quite this piece. Or continue to ask questions when somebody gives you a piece of advice. Not only will that help you to discern whether it is actually a good piece of advice for you and your dog, it will also help you keep learning. And then we also want to, as a perpetual student, this is what I want your foundation to be composed of, okay? A solid foundation in learning theory, dog communication, so dog body language, dog development, so how they develop from puppyhood to adult, and what is required once a dog has finished their public access training. So not necessarily what a puppy in training should look like, but what a fully trained service dog, what their behavior should look like, and what they have to encounter out in public. So a really good way to do that is to actually just go out into public without your dog Go somewhere, go to the mall, go to Target, go to wherever, and really, really, really pay attention to all the things your dog is going to have to filter through and see and hear and come into contact with in Target. So as a Target example, really quick, immediately I'm going, okay, we've got sliding doors. We've got temperature changes when they come in from outside. We've got footing changes when they come in from outside. We've got carts going, which our dogs, remember, if I'm standing up, I'm looking above shopping carts. My dog is on the ground, so he's got shopping carts coming past him. He's got children screaming. He's got rustling shopping bags. He's got people moving things all over the place, random noises going off, big lighting. Okay, that's just off the top of my head, and I'm not even sitting in Target. So one of the best things you can do to understand what your dog is going to need to cope with once he's fully trained is to go to some of these environments and start taking notes of every little thing you notice going on that your dog is also going to notice. And this can help you to really understand what the finished product needs to look like so that you understand what you're working towards and so that you can run pieces of advice through that filter. Now, also, again, learning theory, this can really help you to be a good trainer, to have the foundation that you need, and to run, again, all the advice that you get through that filter of what you do understand from learning theory. And it will give you a really solid jumping off point for the questions you should be asking. So if you have a good understanding of learning theory, then when somebody gives you a piece of advice, you will be better equipped to ask good questions about why, about how, about all these things when it comes to that piece of advice. This is why in our courses, this is what we focus on in the beginning, is a really solid understanding of this stuff. I'm going to just make a note of this to put this in the description. I have a YouTube video on the books that I think every owner trainer should read. And I will post that link in the description of this video. So then we also have, again, dog development and dog body language. And these two things are really important because if you don't understand how your dog develops from puppyhood into adulthood, that's where we see some of the biggest mistakes that we see, which are rushing and comparing. So along with being a perpetual student, I want you to stop rushing your dog and I want you to stop comparing your dog to other people's dogs. Because if you can do those things, you are going to be in a much better position to move forward as an owner trainer. From being a student, being a perpetual student, stop rushing and stop comparing. You're going to be in a much better position to move forward. Now, I have a YouTube video, which I will also link here, where I do talk about puppyhood through adulthood and why your dog is not as behind as you think. It is very easy to look at a 12-week-old puppy, a 15-week-old puppy, and think, oh, he should know more than he does now. But they are still very young at that age. So it's important that you understand dog development so that you understand how quickly you can push your dog and why pushing too hard is detrimental. You need to understand how dogs develop from puppyhood to adulthood in order to do that. Once you understand that piece, again, your ability to discern good advice from poor advice will go up. Very quickly, you will be able to discern good advice from bad advice if you have dog body language understanding, dog development understanding, learning theory understanding, and what was the last one? Oh yes, what finished public access requires of a dog. Once you have those four things, it will be like this filter that you are able to run advice through, and you will much more quickly be able to discern if it is a piece of advice for you and your dog or not. The dog body language piece is also exceptionally important. I cannot tell you the number of videos we watch, and this again goes back to that, well, it worked for me thing. The number of videos we watch on the just random internet videos of owner trainers' dogs working in public, and I see a very stressed dog. Where when you know what you're looking for, you see a lot of stress. I have a YouTube video, I'll link this as well, excuse me, about trigger stacking. And trigger stacking is just one reason that you really need to have a solid understanding of canine behavior, of body language, of how dogs communicate. Because you need, as an owner trainer, you need to be able to see the signs of stress that your dog is showing. And our dogs have a lot of subtle, nuanced body language that they use to communicate. And it's really important that we be able to read that. Because a lot of the time, like I said, we watch videos on just random, owner trainer videos in random places, and we're watching very stressed dogs work. And I don't think anybody wants their dog to be stressed. But it is important, just from a logical perspective, important to remember that a dog who is stressed is not going to be able to do their job well. So, okay, I'm going to double check my notes. If anybody has any questions about the stuff we've talked about here, please go ahead and put them into the comments. And again, if you're watching the replay, the best place for your comments is going to be in our Facebook group, just directly into the Facebook group. And let me check my notes quick, just to see if there's anything else that I'm missing. But again, watch out for this Dunning-Kruger effect. Don't get stuck in it, and don't get stuck taking advice from people who are stuck in it. Be a perpetual student. Continue learning, asking questions, especially learning theory, dog development, dog communication, and what finished public access actually requires a dog to deal with. And stop rushing and stop comparing. Okay, these are really important things. When you get bogged down in this stuff, we see success rates just drop. They plummet when people get stuck in either thinking they know everything, rushing, or comparing. These things are really, really important. Now, I'm just going to really quickly mention that if you, of course, want to learn more, if you want to work with us, our Foundations course is open for enrollment. We are, however, closing the doors. I'm just looking at the calendar on August 6th. We have not closed enrollment in a very long time, but we are going to be closing enrollment on August 6th for a variety of reasons. I don't know when we will be reopening it, and that course is the first step in joining our academy. So if you want to join our online academy, you do have to take the Foundations course first. So I just wanted to make a quick mention of that in case anybody is on the fence and has been thinking about joining. Now is the time, because on August 6th, we are closing registration for that. And we will be opening it up again before the end of the year, but I don't know exactly when yet. We're still trying to decide. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, or I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and jump off, but this stuff is really important, so please watch those YouTube videos that I mentioned, continue learning, continue asking questions, and I'm just looking for questions. I've got a comment, but continue asking questions and continue learning, okay? Okay, what are some other trainers you really like so that we can learn from them as well? I'm trying to think of specific trainers. So here's the trainers that I watch the most. Hold on. What happens to me when I get questions like this is that it's almost like flashcards, like going through my brain really fast of like this trainer and this trainer and this trainer. And so I'm trying to come up with a coherent answer for you. The trainers that we like the most are generally not service dog trainers. And so I'm going to give you some resources. I'm going to give you a couple of like things you can go to here in a second. But I just want to put this out front, is that they are not service dog trainers. And so not all of their advice applies. Not all of their dog training methods are right for service dogs. Because what I wanted to just mention quickly is there's a difference between like a dog training philosophy, which is say how we avoid positive punishment in our training here. That is a philosophy, but saying I use positive reinforcement to train heel, that's not a method. There are lots of methods to train heel that fall under the philosophy of positive reinforcement. As a like positive reinforcement can be a dog training philosophy. This is a whole other thing. So for example, one of the trainers I'm thinking of is Denise Fenzi. I really, really like Denise Fenzi, and they have a podcast and they have their online courses and things, but they are geared towards performance dogs. So competition obedience, competition agility, all of these types of things. And so how you teach a competitive heel is nothing like how you're going to teach a heel for a service dog. So I love Denise Fenzi. I love her content and the podcast and everything, but not everything applies to service dog training. Hannah Brannigan I love her podcast, Drinking from the Toilet. I recommend that podcast all the time. Again, most of those people on her podcast, they are talking about competition training or pet dog training. So lots of really great stuff in there, but it's not all going to apply to service dogs. So this is why understanding what is required of public access for a fully trained service dog is really important. So for example, when you learn how to teach heeling from somebody like Denise Fenzi or Hannah Brannigan, they are teaching a competition heel. So the dog is firmly in heel position. They are staring up at their handler. They are very prancy. It is very formal. That is not a behavior that a dog can maintain for the amount of time that is required out in public. We also want our service dogs to be paying attention to things going on around them so that we don't have to pay attention to every little thing. So I want my service dog looking forward so that they don't run into stuff, for example. So there is a lot of, if you pay attention to how those two trainers, for example, train a heel, there's a lot of really great dog training advice in there about how to break down behaviors, how to shape, how to use criteria and rate of reinforcement, all these things. But that isn't how you'll actually train your service dog heel, if that makes sense. But watch the book. I have a YouTube video about which books to read because all of those authors have various social media presences and things. So like Patricia McConnell, Hannah Brannigan, Karen Pryor. She's not making new content anymore, but of course Karen Pryor Clicker Training is still around. So Ken Ramirez is doing their stuff now. He's phenomenal. Laura Monaco Torelli has some YouTube videos. She does a lot of cooperative care, so teaching dogs to stand for blood draws and things. That's stuff we teach in our academy. Yeah, watch the YouTube video about the books because I put a lot of thought into that video. So what you're getting right now is like off the top of my head, whereas I put a lot of thought into that video about which books I really think every single owner trainer should read, and then a couple of extra ones for depending on what's going on with your own dog, and all of those trainers are fantastic. I don't know that there were many service dog specific trainers on that list, but they're all really, really good. So that is another reason, like I was just saying, as a perpetual student, as an owner trainer, one of the things you really need to understand is what a fully trained service dog acts like, looks like, has to deal with, so that as you're watching all of this stuff, whether the information comes from really expert level dog trainers or other owner trainers, you have more information about how that piece of advice would impact your dog long term. So when I used to train, I haven't done any competing in a very long time, but when I used to do competition agility and when I used to do search and rescue with my dogs, the way I would train them in some ways was very similar and in some ways was vastly different because I was trying to build more excitement in those dogs. I want my service dogs to be pretty chill, okay? The types of dogs we choose for that are very different. So like the dogs that you watch somebody like Denise Fenzi work are probably not going to be good service dog candidates because they weren't chosen for that. They were chosen for something else. So it's important that because you're working towards service dog training, that you have a really good understanding of what that means, what that looks like when it's finished, so that you can run all that advice and all that content through that filter. So I hope that that's helpful. All right, that is going to be it for today then. I am planning on getting in here more often because I miss it. Because I do think that this is a really great way to talk about some of these service dog training topics. So I will see you guys later. If you have any questions, put them into the Facebook group. And if you want to know more about our online course, I will of course put that link in the description as well. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.